Thank you, Cantor Cohen. The Torahs are safe. That was the email message that I got from a neighboring synagogue in my former community in Los Angeles the other day. I have been on that email list for Or Ami, a Reformed congregation in the Calabasas area of the San Fernando Valley, for more than 20 years. I just never took the time to unsubscribe. Their Rabbi, Paul Kipnis, is a good friend and maybe even a distant relative. My grandmother and my mother's maiden name is his same last name. We're not exactly sure. No offense to Paul, but I usually ignore his congregational emails, never having taken the time to unsubscribe from an email list that doesn't really pertain to me. I mean, I'm glad that his shul is having a seniors program, and it's nice to know that they have outings planned for their youth group teens, but no offense to Rabbi Kipnis, but we have our own shul and congregation to worry about. Until Tuesday. On Tuesday, I greeted his email with a small measure of relief. The Torahs were safe, but a far larger measure of heartbreak, worry, and dread. I know that area and that community. At least according to Facebook, I have hundreds of former congregants in harm's way and dozens who have lost their homes, many, many more who have been evacuated. Having lived in Los Angeles for almost 25 years, I am very aware of the destruction that the Santa Ana wind-blown wildfires can have on those communities. But I have never seen anything like this. Even the Oakland Hills fires in my childhood community of the San Francisco Bay Area, those pale in comparison to what I am seeing on the news and what I'm hearing from friends. As it so happens, I was in Palm Springs this past week on Tuesday at a rabbinic conference with Paul. He rushed back to his community shortly after our morning services after the fires broke out. He knew what could happen. This was not the first time that his neighborhood was engulfed in flames. And I followed him the next day, as I was always planning to come back through Los Angeles to visit my in-laws and fly back with my father-in-law Arthur, who is here tonight. They are safe. Their home is not in harm's way, in spite of worrying, well-intentioned calls from friends across the country that don't quite understand LA geography or topography looking at a TV screen. I still don't know where all the freeways go, so it's understandable. But as I drove in from the desert with a colleague of mine, I saw it with my own eyes, and I smelled the smoke and felt it in my lungs. That eerie but beautiful sunset in the west, trying to discern refracted sunlight from glowing fires. My college roommate, Rabbi Joshua Grader, the rabbi of the Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center, and his wife Francie, lost their home and their 100-year-old synagogue buildings. Like with Paul, I got a message from Josh's shul. I guess I belong to his email list too. The Torahs are safe. Among them, the Nehedar Torah, a Persian Torah personally returned to the family that commissioned it in Iran in the 1930s, personally returned to them by Ayatollah Khomeini, responding to a plea by the family's patriarch. Its story, described by journalist Rob Eshman, itself one of diaspora and survival through unexpected upheavals. Its story makes it a powerful emblem for a community already determined to rebuild. The Torahs are safe, but the people are in peril. We are clear. We know that Judaism prioritizes human life, pikuach nefesh, over all material things. There is no halachic question. You do not endanger your life for a scroll, or a picture, or a menorah, your ketubah, the Shabbos candlesticks your bubby carried across the ocean. The Torah proclaims, B'chai bechem, live by the words of Torah, don't let them be the end of you. Which the rabbis of the Talmud explain means that preserving life takes precedence over almost all commandments in the Torah. For those that are wondering, it's the exception of idolatry, sexual immorality, and murder that you cannot violate for the purpose of pikuach nefesh. The idea encapsulates the view that Torah is a guide for life, promoting health, well-being, and moral living, not a set of rules to be followed at the expense of one's life. I think there's tremendous wisdom in that in Judaism. A religion that self-limits itself, I think, is a wise one. But beyond human life, material things have value. They have profound and transcendent meaning that causes one to rush into a fire to save them. Our Hanukkah is an example. Our Torah scrolls behind us that survived the fire of our synagogue in the 1980s on West 10th. The first lesson from these fires is a pragmatic but brutal one. What would you take? What would you take from your home if you only had minutes to grab it and go? If the people are safe and if the pets, if you can get to them, are out of danger, what do you save next? What are your Torah scrolls? What are your irreplaceable sacred objects that you would take if you only had just so much time and just so much room? It's not just a thought experiment. This weekend, we should all make a list and make a plan. When I heard about the fires, one of my first thoughts was of Melanie Samuels, our mutual friend and congregant, who lost her home and their beloved cat in a house fire a few months ago. And so I wrote to Melanie, aware that these images that she was seeing and we were seeing on television must be so emotionally triggering for her and her family. Now, Melanie wasn't home when the fire started in her house, but she did arrive in time to watch it all burn down. After it was put out after 7 fire trucks and 3 hours, the fire chief allowed her and her son Bram, who had been at home at the time of the fire but got out safely, thank God, allowed them 5 minutes to go in. Just 5 minutes. She told me that they took photo albums, that Bram took a photo of his grandmother from when she was young that was still hanging on the wall. And Melanie took sentimental jewelry that she had kept from her mother, her grandmother, her family. She says, looking back, she regrets not taking pictures of old photos, as those could never be replaced. She wishes she had thought to keep mementos like love letters in a separate place, like maybe her office, so that those are not lost in a house fire, not lost forever. And she lamented that she will never see her dad's notes that he wrote to her when she was at summer camp, or Greg's years of love letters again. She said that she had always imagined that she would look at those when she sat in the Louis Brier one day. Pragmatically, she also told me that she wished that she had kept an inventory and taken photos of all of her belongings, as it's a very daunting task to figure out the replacement value of a lifetime of collecting. So again, if you take nothing else from this sermon, this drosh tonight, this weekend, we should all make a list and make a plan. The Jewish people are in many ways defined by turning tragedy into lesson. Jewish tradition teaches that even the darkest moments can carry lessons or opportunities for spiritual growth. While suffering is not glorified in Judaism, it is often framed as a call to introspection or a challenge to reaffirm core values, an impetus to make profound and lasting changes in our lives. The destruction of the first and the second temples, for example, that led to a transformation in Jewish identity and practice. Without a central temple, Judaism couldn't be Judaism. And so it evolved into a text and synagogue-centered faith. The reason that you are here, and there are not animals here, is because we changed, allowing it to survive and thrive in a diaspora. One of my colleagues calls us the knock down, get up again people. I like that. At its core, the Jewish approach to tragedy teaches that hardship should not be the end of the story. Instead, it becomes a catalyst for action, for learning, and for renewal. By turning grief into growth, both individually and communally, the Jewish people have transformed, throughout our history, exile, oppression, and genocide into commitments for justice, education, and the flourishing of Jewish life worldwide. I asked Melanie, what have you been mourning after the devastation of the fire? And she confided in me that it has been the loss of my happy place. That house was our family home, and we hosted so many gatherings for friends and families. Our porch was a place that people would stop by on their way home from something in true Southern fashion. It was a place of shared joy and sorrows over the years, and it had some magic about it. And when I drive by it now, she said, it looks like the spirit has left the building. This reminded me of an incident in this week's Parsha, Vayechi. Our Parsha tells the story of Joseph and his brothers burying their father Jacob. If you remember the animosity, the violence, and conflict between Joseph and his brothers, then you can imagine that the brothers all gathered together to bury their father could be a moment fraught with tension. The Midrash, Tanhuma, imagines the moment like this. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they grew frightened. What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us, they wondered. And what did they see that made them afraid, the Midrash asks? As they were returning from burying their father, they saw that Joseph had turned off the road, and he went to look into the pit where his brothers had thrown him in, the pit where his brothers had cast him into so many years before. And his brothers thought that in that moment, as Joseph was looking into the pit, that he was dwelling on the terrible deed that they had done to him years before. But what was Joseph thinking as he peered into that faithful hole? In what way did he remember that bleak moment? The Midrash answers it differently than the brothers think. The Midrash says, Joseph stood up looking into that pit. He stood up and he prayed. And he said, "Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, who performed a miracle for me in this place." There's an echo of the dreidel, Nes Gadol Haya Po, that message that we can hear in that. Sometimes, maybe oftentimes, we need physical things to trigger emotional memories. In retrospect, Joseph is able to piece together the harrowing events of his life into a story that reveals God's intent. Although you intended me harm, Joseph says, Elohim, God, intended it for good, to bring about the present result. Imagine being able to look at that in such a way, to keep alive many people. I was thrown into that pit. That's how he sees it. My personal theology, and I would say broadly the Jewish theology, is not one that says bad things happen for a reason, to teach a lesson. I have said many times from this bima, my reading of Jewish tradition is that there is a reason for everything that happens, but not an agenda that things happen for a prescribed reason. There's not divine punishment. These fires are not divine punishment. They are a natural disaster, perhaps with human causation, but they are, in some ways, random. Our task is not to lose faith in ourselves and to lose hope in the future as we stand looking into our pit, as we stand looking into smoldering ruins, like Joseph of his fraternal torment. For Melanie, the aftermath of the fire showed her how loved and supported her and her children are. How important it is to be good neighbors, to have good friends, a community that surrounds you, that holds you up when you are knocked down to the ground by circumstance. She learned that from the fire. For Joseph, the lesson is that his survival must mean something, not to waste the second chance at life and the opportunities that come with this reset. We, all of us here, we didn't die in the fire. We could have. This could have happened to us. It could have happened here. It could happen at any time, anywhere. And if not fire, then earthquake or storm or something else. The lessons for me and the lessons from our tradition is that every day is a blessing, a gift. The poet would say that is why it's called the present. It's maybe the oldest sermon in the world. Maybe it's the only sermon in the world. Don't waste time. Don't waste second chances. The lesson that we must take from these fires is that we must live with purpose and with gratitude and with a sense of urgency. The Torahs are safe, but the people are in peril. And yet amid the ashes, we are reminded of the strength that we carry as a community and the sacred responsibility we have to each other. The fires, even a border away, they force us to confront what truly matters. Not the possessions that we accumulate, but the love that we share, the relationships we nurture, and and the values we uphold. What we choose to save, whether a Torah scroll or a family photo, it reflects the essence of who we are and what we hold sacred. But even when the material is lost, the meaning endures, held in memory and carried forward in our actions. As Joseph stood at the edge of that pit and transformed his pain into blessing, so too we are called to turn tragedy into renewal. And the Jewish people, we have always rebuilt homes, communities, identities, synagogues, temples, turning loss into resilience and despair into hope. We have always done that. We are the knock down, get up again people. And so let us ask ourselves, what will we do with the gift of another day that is not promised to us? How will we ensure that our survival has meaning? Let the lessons of the fire be this: that we do not wait for disaster to prioritize what matters most. That we take stock of our lessons and our lives now, cherishing each moment, mending broken relationships, building stronger connections, and living in alignment with our highest values. And may we emerge from every pit and every fire and every trial not only intact, but transformed. Like Joseph, may we find blessings even in the aftermath of pain, looking into the pit, looking at the smoldering ruins. And like Melanie, when that proverbial fire comes, may we lean on community, finding strength in each other to rebuild what has been lost. And this Shabbos, as we reflect on the fires, the pits, the blessings in our lives, those real and those metaphorical, may we rededicate ourselves to living with purpose, to living with gratitude, to living with love. For every day is a gift. It is up to us how we will use it. Just please, please, don't waste it. Shabbat Shalom. Baruch Tiyeh. Thanks, Arthur. Our service continues with Elenu, page 586.